Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa. And this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers.
Hey listeners.
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
We are glad you're joining us. We are so appreciative every time you join us.
We are. And we've been really loving everybody commenting on our social medias and sending us messages, so keep that up too.
And if you're a message virgin, pop the bubble.
I think it's the cherry.
Okay, scratch all that.
I might leave this in.
I just wanted to say that if you haven't sent us a message, it's not too late. You can still send us one.
That's right. Or at least come and follow us on our social medias and follow us wherever you listen. And if you really like us, you could give us a nice old thumbs up, a rate, and a review.
That would be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Because all of us true crime fans need to stick together. And speaking of which, true crime fans, tell me I am not wrong that at least once you have seen a garbage bag on the side of the road and questioned if someone was inside of it.
Oh, I've done that.
Oh, totally.
The whole scenario plays out in my head, actually, where I approach the bag, I find it, and I'm making a plan of how I'm going to alert somebody else.
And how you're not going to contaminate it.
Right.
For the crime scene investigators. Totally. Even when I walk my dog out in the field, the grass gets really long in this one area. And I'm like, what if I found a body in here? Like, I'd have to keep the dog away from it. Like, I'm already thinking ahead of what I would have to do.
I think it's only true crime fans that actually think like that.
Absolutely. I know that there's at least a couple of people listening to us right now who would have to agree. And the more that I research murder, the more I realize that you could come across something to indicate foul play during your everyday life. My mind tends to lean this way. What if I found a murder weapon, came across a large amount of blood, or worse, discovered a body?
I do that all the time, too.
Okay, I'm glad it's not just me.
Anytime that I see something suspicious, I mentally note the time. If I ever had to call it in, I could tell the police, this is the time that I saw this occur.
Right? Or take a photo or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're alone in this way of thinking.
Hopefully we're not. We're just a bunch of weirdos.
Well, that is true, but maybe everyone else is too. Maybe it's not so weird. But as we research, we have come across so many cases where something gets found by the general public. And I feel like the only thing that could make this type of discovery worse than it already would be to make this type of realization in your own home.
What?
Mm-hmm. The case that I'm covering today, a lot of you might remember hearing on the news a few years ago. I know that when the trial was finished, there were a few listeners who sent us articles and videos about this case because it is so shocking.
Is it the mom that finds the head in their son's closet?
Yes.
Oh, I have this one in my vault.
Oh, well, you can't do it now. I'm doing it.
I have so much research on this one. Okay, I have.
Really?
I do know a little bit about this case.
Well, you must know a lot about this case then.
This is a crazy one.
It is.
I am so glad that you're going to tell it to me.
And now you don't have to.
That's right. It is disturbing.
It is so disturbing. I actually started to research this case on my own interest. And then as I got into the details, I remembered that some of you listeners sent us messages about it. So now it's a listener request episode. Some of the listeners that requested this case included Pauline, Mandy, Elizabeth, and Amy. If I missed someone, I apologize. This case is for all of you, even Melissa, or any of you who didn't actually request it. I'm going to give a disclaimer right from the start. This one is brutal. There are a lot of details that are uncomfortable and unnerving to hear. While watching the interrogation video of this monster, I sincerely felt a little sick to my stomach. He is proud of his handiwork. He laughed while telling officers of the twisted acts he committed and never showed one iota of remorse. This dirtbag was 19 when he was caught, and I have zero doubt that he would have made a career out of killing had he not been caught. And how he was caught might shock you the most.
Yes. The body cam footage from this case is so disturbing.
It really is. And I watched all of it, so you guys don't have to. But let's get into it. At 2:00 a.m. on Sunday, February 28th, 2021, emergency services would come face to face with a killer and not even know it. A call was made about a car that had accidentally entered the Colorado River. Police arrived at the Blue Heron boat ramp and found a 19-year-old man who had embarrassingly got his Ford 500 stuck in the water.
I gotta see what it looks like. Oh, nothing special.
No, it's what a 19-year-old boy would be driving.
Okay.
As Melissa mentioned, there is body cam footage a lot throughout this case. And at this particular time, there was body cam footage of officers checking out the scene. By this time, the young man's parents are with him. It sounds like he called them first, and they were able to come to their son's aid before the police arrived. On the footage, you can hear officers and the parents discussing how they are going to get the car out of the water, especially in the middle of the night. The mom said that she had called a towing company and was asked to text them a picture of the car. Spirits are actually high during this encounter. It's one of those moments where it's like, what the heck do we do now?
Well, especially right after, oh, this could have went really bad, and we're glad you're okay.
Yes, exactly. The mother explains to officers that her son is an inexperienced driver. They didn't actually let him get his license right away to be extra cautious over his safety. He was almost 18 when he finally started driving on his own. And she even makes a little joke about, you know how 16 and 17-year-olds can make really stupid decisions, and then she laughs and she's like, well, I guess, 18, 19-year-olds can too. Because what can you do but laugh in a situation like this?
Right. After you found out everybody's going to be okay.
Right. And it's a very unique situation to happen. Police talk to the son, and he tells police that he was feeling like he needed to get out. So he drove to the boat ramp and got out for a little bit to, quote, relax and think. The young man explains that he backed down the hill a little bit and parked on the boat ramp. He thought it would be easy to get back out. When he went to leave, he basically couldn't get enough traction and started to slide towards the water. The son was in the car as it entered the water, and he states how it started to fill with water and he had to escape. Because of this, he is talking with police from inside his parents' car. They joke because he is cold, wrapped in a blanket, and doesn't have pants on. He took them off since they were soaking wet. Everyone kind of makes fun and laughs at the situation. The dad of the young man explains that he is the owner of the life jacket program on the boat ramp, which I think would help explain why his son was there in the middle of the night. It was a place that was obviously familiar to the family. A tow truck finally agrees to come in the middle of the night to retrieve the car from the cold water. While they wait for the tow truck, the mother asks if she can take her son home so he can warm up and put on dry clothes. The officers say since it isn't a crash, he is free to go. The mother agrees to come back once she drops off her son, and she does, along with her husband.
Yeah, they seem like nice people.
Definitely. About an hour later, the tow truck arrives. When the car is pulled from the Colorado River, police notice that there is blood on the back bumper of the car. They ask the young man's parents if they have any idea how that got there, because there is quite a bit of it. No one suspects anything sinister. They don't even for sure know that it's blood yet. Instead, the officer has the mother phone her son to see if he was injured somehow when he escaped the vehicle. Sometimes during situations like this, adrenaline could be running high and you might not even realize that you've been hurt. She calls her son and the conversation can be heard on the recording. When she tells him there's blood on the bumper, he acts shocked and is like, "There's blood on it?" The officer and mother say that they aren't sure, just that something red is all over it, especially underneath the license plate.
Which is so interesting because remember, this car has been in the water. So it had to be quite a significant amount not to have already been washed away.
And even after it's pulled out and inspected, there's blood even on the handle of the car. But you're right, it had to have been a large amount. Especially, too, for the officer to notice it in the dark.
Mm-hmm. Good job that he's being that observant, because oftentimes you can get into the situation where, oh, this is just a teenager being stupid. It's a minor know-nothing call. And so you turn off all of those suspicious senses of looking for extra evidence. But he didn't.
No, and at least this way he could record that there was some type of red substance found on the car.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of this discovery, the vehicle is released back to the family, and it is towed to their residence. Little did everyone know, police would be at this residence the very next day, and this time there would be no laughter. On Monday, March 1st, 2021, at 1:48 in the afternoon, a call was placed to Grand Junction, Colorado's 911. A woman says to the dispatcher, quote, "Hi, there is an emergency. I found something in my son's closet wrapped in a plastic bag." The dispatcher asks, quote, "What is it?" And the woman responds, quote, "I think it's a human head." The dispatcher, in unbelief, replies, "It's a what?" The woman repeats herself and says, "I think it's a human head." The dispatcher asks her why she thinks it's that. She says, quote, "Because it looks like it."
Oh, but good on this mom for calling.
Absolutely. During her conversation to the 911 dispatcher, the lady explains that she found a second bag but did not open it, and that both bags are now sitting in her kitchen sink. The woman continues to explain that her son is home, but outside. He has a shotgun in his room, but she doesn't expect that he will be violent towards officers, and they will go retrieve that gun right away. She explains that her son was at a friend's house, but they asked him to come home before they called, and that she was calling from the backyard while her son is currently in the front yard. Before we go any further, can you imagine making this discovery? This woman was tidying up inside her home, and when she entered her son's bedroom, she looked inside a Rubbermaid tote that he had in his closet. She saw the bag and wondered what was inside. When she opened it, she discovered maggots and then quickly realized what she was looking at. She never did open the second bag. The woman called her husband at work and told him that he needed to come home right now. The woman ran a daycare inside her home. She quickly called the parents and told them that they had to come immediately to pick up their children due to a family emergency.
Could you imagine finding out afterwards that this was the family emergency?
Right?
And that your kids had been in that house with this
human head.
Well, yeah, and the murderer.
Yes. I cannot even imagine. And she said the parents came and were like, "Oh, I hope everything's okay." And when she called them, had said, "Everything's fine with your child's safe. We have a family emergency and you need to come get them now. I'm really sorry." But she wanted to make sure that the kids were safe before she called. And she wanted to make sure that her son was home before she called. She really was smart in this situation.
It is quite incredible how the mom handled it.
It was. Once the house was cleared, they decided to call the police on their son. They asked him to come home, and as he pulled up, the woman went into the backyard and called 911 so he wouldn't get suspicious. And do you think most parents would do this?
No, I actually don't think most would. It's interesting. We are always in sync on the cases we choose, because the case I have for you next week talks about how far would we go to believe our child. I think most parents would actually question their child first. They'd want the information. What's your side of the story? Before they called anybody.
Right. And that was my next point. I have written here exactly that. How many parents would first speak to their child and possibly even try to help them hide what they had done? I know that we have covered cases where the parents did help their child evade the law.
Or at least hear their side of the story first.
Right. And when this son is later interviewed, he did say that that's what he thought his parents would do if they found out. He thought, "Oh, I think my mom would come and talk to me first."
Mm-hmm.
So he was not expecting this. My heart does go out to this couple. This would have been so incredibly hard, but I do 100% think that they did the right thing.
Oh, 100%.
Is that what you would have done, Melissa?
Oh, I think I would have talked to my kid first. I don't think that I would have covered up the crime, but I would want to know the whole story.
Right.
But then how many different ways can you explain why there's a severed human head in your closet?
Yeah, you're not just holding that for a friend.
No.
Well, listeners, what would you do? Let us know. Again, there is a police body cam of the interaction when police arrive at the scene. The same young man from the car in the river incident the night before is standing in the driveway of his home. He is very calm. The whole family is outside and you can see them on this body cam, and it really is heartbreaking just to see how distressed they all are.
The mom in particular just breaks my heart.
Yes. As an officer approaches the young man, he asks, quote, "Your parents have concerns of some stuff they may have found in your room." The man answers, quote, "Yeah, I believe so." The officer follows up by asking, quote, "And what would it be?" The young man pauses so slightly, and as he turns his head slowly, he says in the most ominous tone, quote, "A human head and hands." It's so chilling. You can actually see his demeanor change when he says this.
Well, he's proud of the fact, almost.
He is. Trust me when I say that we are going into all of the details about how a human head and a set of human hands ended up inside this boy's closet. But first we need to discuss who this boy is. And I say boy because he's only 19. He is still a teenager living at home with his parents and brother. Brian Cohee Jr. was born on January 10th, 2002, to Terry and Brian Cohee Sr. Since Brian's father is named Brian, I will only refer to him as Brian Sr. So if I say Brian, I'm talking about the son. Terry and Brian Sr. had 2 sons and were raising them in Grand Junction, Colorado. They were living a quiet suburban life. The parents had been married for almost 3 decades. They held down jobs, and their children were well taken care of. They seemed like an average, all-American family. No abuse, no addiction, no daily chaos. I will give a small disclaimer, because at one point, Brian talks about his dad's house. So perhaps they were separated at a time, but it did sound like the parents were still together, but I'm not 100% certain. If they weren't together, they got along very well. They were still a team. Brian was said to be a happy child to raise. However, his parents did notice that he had some quirks. For instance, he would sometimes lick his shoes to clean them and would chew on his fingers and toes until he sometimes needed medical treatment. His parents testified that he was a joy to raise and wasn't ever violent when he was younger. Brian's parents did monitor his behavior, and at around the age of 5, he was diagnosed with ADHD. Despite their efforts, there were issues brewing with their son. In court, it would come out that Brian had territorial issues while attending Broadway Elementary School. At Brooklyn Middle School, he began having outbursts and displayed some antisocial behavior. While at Fruita High School, he did start to exhibit some violent behavior, even injuring other students. So there's this escalation. Brian's family doctor, Dr. Craig Gustafson, who started seeing him at age 15, would later testify that Brian was depressed and was treated with a low-dose antidepressant starting at the age of 16 in 2018. In December of 2020, Brian had now reached nearly the maximum dose of the antidepressant, just a couple of months prior to the murder.
And it really didn't seem to have any effect, right? That's why they had to keep upping the dosage?
Right, it would work for a little while and then they would need to increase it. Despite being diagnosed with depression, this family doctor stated that Brian did not show any signs of psychosis, including delusions, hallucinations, or paranoia. He also never spoke to him about wanting to hurt himself or others. Dr. Gustafson had also ordered a CT scan of Brian's brain after he complained of frequent headaches. He wanted to rule out any type of tumor or blood clot. The CT scan came back as normal. Dr. Gustafson saw Brian just 3 days before the murder took place. Brian had an infected boil under his right armpit that had to be removed on February 24th, and it was still healing when he was arrested. They actually at one point thought maybe that's where the blood came from. Maybe he had ripped open that incision. During adolescence, Brian had also been seen by a psychologist, Dr. Katrina Catton. I believe that Terry took Brian to see this doctor in 2019 at the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Hospital. Dr. Catton had diagnosed Brian with ADHD, major depressive disorder, and a mild form of autism referred to as level 1, meaning the lowest level. This form of autism, also called Asperger's, is high functioning and did not include any intellectual impairment, nor did it require very much assistance or support. So he could function with all of these diagnoses.
Which meant he could also tell right from wrong.
Yes. And that is going to be the biggest question during the trial. According to his mother, Brian regularly took medications for his anxiety, depression, and ADHD. She would remind him to take it every night, and she said the pills would slowly whittle down, so she assumed he was taking them. Dr. Catton had sent a letter of concern to Brian's mother, Terry, stating that Brian seemed to idolize people like Stalin, Hitler, the Columbine school shooter, Ted Bundy, and Jeffrey Dahmer, just to name a few.
That's disturbing.
Yes. So this doctor testified that Brian stated, quote, "I want to be famous, and it doesn't matter for what." She also had recommended, at the time of seeing him, that he receive further evaluations by those even more qualified, namely to test for possible psychosis. Unfortunately, he couldn't get in to see a doctor for this. He was kind of saying, this is above my pay grade, my expertise. I do think you need to have him seen by somebody else.
And that was in the works at the time, or it just had never happened?
I think this had happened just a little bit before, but when Terry tried to get him in to see a doctor that could help, they were full. They weren't taking new patients. So I think it was on the back burner, to be honest, according to Terry's testimony.
Right. And obviously the psychiatrist didn't feel like it was that burning of a situation that she needed to refer him right away or do a direct referral to somebody.
Or we need to get him admitted somewhere.
Right.
True. So yeah, that's a good point. So the parents could have been like, okay, well, we'll try and get this in. Maybe he was on the wait list to be seen.
Right. But it doesn't sound like there was an urgency expressed to them. And so you can see how it would become a back burner, or we're just waiting for the next local psychiatrist that can see him.
Exactly.
Instead of really pushing to be like, no, he needs to be seen now.
Yes, I do totally agree. Terry and Brian Sr. knew that their son had a fascination with all things morbid. Terry tried to help channel this in a more positive way by purchasing him a book on forensics. She encouraged him to consider a career in forensics somehow. Brian had plans of joining the military and then doing just that, pursuing a career in forensics, because it really did interest him.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, Melissa wanted to do that.
That's right.
Other people who knew Brian also stated that he was morbid and had a very dark sense of humor. One of those types of humor that is taken too far and can leave people with raised eyebrows. He was always joking about things like murder.
Right, but you can see how that would be brushed off because of the Asperger's.
Yes.
Not being able to read a room and know the social norms of how to respond to it.
Exactly. And you're right on. A lot of people do kind of write this off to that. One of his classmates said that a lot of people didn't like Brian because of how he always joked about murder and because he would say mean things to people. An example of this morbid humor is that Brian once asked a group of kids if they liked crispy meat bites. He went into more graphic detail, but basically he explained it was when you essentially make your pet into meatballs or patties and ate them. This joking would escalate to Brian actually hurting an animal. In 2018, on Halloween, at the age of 16, Brian viciously killed a cat to quench his morbid curiosity.
So you can see a clear escalation.
Absolutely you can. So after killing this cat in a very grotesque way, he ended up decapitating the cat and kept its head inside the house in a shoebox for 3 days.
Without his parents knowing.
Right. Because once it started to smell, then he threw it away. And I think he really felt proud of himself that they had no idea that he had this in the house and was able to even throw it away without them knowing.
But knowing what he goes on to do next, doesn't that feel like he was practicing?
Like foreshadowing?
Uh-huh.
Yes. And some people think that he killed more cats than just this one, but this was the only account that I could confirm. But people said, yeah, cats were going missing. But that's just rumor.
But this one he claims to have done.
Yeah, this one he really did do. Brian also admitted later to finding a dead groundhog in 2020 and skinning it to try and make leather. At school, a teacher found one of Brian's notebooks. Inside this notebook, Brian had written stats about infamous serial killers, including their MOs and how many victims they've killed.
This should be a huge warning sign.
Everyone who knew Brian knew that he had an obsession with serial killers, so much so that it earned him the nickname Dahmer at school.
I don't think I knew that tidbit.
Yes. A lot of people would agree that Brian was quote-unquote off, but some assumed, like you said, it was because of his diagnoses, so they thought he was harmless. During his adolescence, Brian had also been seeing a counselor. He started seeing B. Phillips in 2017 and had 24 sessions with her. During this time, the counselor noticed some disturbing things about Brian. I'll name just a few. Brian would refer to trans people as it. He didn't think it was wrong to hurt or steal from people. In fact, he said, quote, "It's what we're supposed to do." He also admitted to not feeling anything when his uncle passed away. He reportedly felt ambivalent about it. Proving his lack of compassion for others, during high school, Brian purposely caused a female classmate to become triggered. This classmate had severe PTSD, and loud noises was one of the things to set her off. Brian allegedly came up behind her and clapped super loud, causing the poor girl to break down. Brian knew this was wrong when he did it, but he thought it would be funny. Brian did graduate high school. At the time of the murder, he was working part-time at the grocery store chain Safeway. His co-workers said that Brian was quiet at first, but had become more talkative in the months leading up to the murder. One co-worker recalled Brian telling her that he had no friends. She responded by saying that the people at work were his friends, and he replied that they were only his friends out of pity. But he did have a few friends. He had a couple.
It's an interesting statement because it really shows that he can understand emotions.
Yeah, it's true. And when some of his friends were interviewed, they said, we were all kind of misfits in high school, and that's how we kind of came together. It would come out later that in the months leading up to the murder, Brian was constantly thinking about murder. He wanted to know what it felt like. Later in his interrogation, he would admit that he wanted to kill either a quote-unquote homeless person or a quote-unquote prostitute, because they were less likely to be missed and it would be easier to get away with it.
Because he had studied previous people that had gotten away with it.
Yes, a lot of serial killers do prey on people who they feel won't be missed and that police aren't going to work as hard to find the killer.
Right. Those vulnerable populations.
Yes. Brian would often drive around at night looking for homeless encampments and sex workers. He finally made his move in the late evening of February 27th. After Brian's mother made the grisly discovery inside her son's closet, and after he admitted to the police that he had murdered someone, Brian was arrested and taken in for questioning. What I found interesting about his arrest is that they never placed handcuffs on him, even after he asked if they were going to. He even thought it was weird. I watched a great documentary that included a lot of Brian's interrogation on YouTube by Explore With Us. I'm going to warn you that it is a hard watch, and some of the interview has even been redacted, which you don't see that often. At least I haven't seen that very often. During this 2-hour interview, Brian is almost jovial. He acts intellectually superior to the people interviewing him, especially to the woman when she is in the room. He mansplains things like decomposition to her. You can also tell that Brian regards himself in the same running as killers like Edmund Kemper and Jeffrey Dahmer. He even explains in detail why he is like Ed Kemper, the dichotomy of wanting to make a girl feel good, but also seeing her head on a stick.
That is disturbing, but it's almost like he is excited because he feels like, oh, now I'm going to get all of that attention and I'm going to be famous like I want to be. This is the beginning. It's like he's excited.
It's true. He even actually uses that word in the interrogation. He does act excited, and it's sickening to watch. It is clear that Brian is bragging about what he did. He does not display shame or remorse at all for what he did. It did make my stomach turn a little. Brian makes an assumption that he will likely go to jail for 15, 20 years. And he uses this reasoning to just tell it all like it happened. He said he figured, quote, why fight it?
It's almost like he thinks it was worth it.
Yes. And it's just joking, like, oh, I'm probably going to get 15 years? And then he's like, do you think maybe 20? I think he thinks he's going to get out. He's going to kind of be the celebrity and he's going to be able to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That this is just part of his journey, a little hiccup in it.
Well, not even a hiccup. It's almost like he welcomes the interrogation.
Right, that I'm fulfilling my fate.
Let me tell you about it.
Mm-hmm.
He gets his jollies off of almost trying to shock them.
He does. And I do think what he says is accurate. He does not hold back, but I also don't think he embellishes like some killers would. Perhaps that is why this is so disturbing. I don't think he's exaggerating. And physical evidence does support what he actually says he did. Brian does get physically excited during the interrogation and even acts out things that he did, including making the animalistic growling sounds that he said he made while taking another person's life. This is your warning that what I'm about to tell you is horrific. What Brian did that night is nothing short of evil and inhumane. If you want to forward a few minutes or tap out, feel free. Brian had been driving around on the night of February 27th. He said he was in a bad place mentally, and so he wasn't thinking positively. After about an hour and a half of driving, now around 11 o'clock p.m., Brian drives under the bridge or overpass near the sheriff's office. Brian states that he saw a shape on the railway track and thought, quote, oh, interesting. He stops to look and sees something large wrapped in a canvas. He quickly realizes that it has to be a homeless person. Brian doesn't necessarily say this, but to me, this was the perfect opportunity for Brian. He wanted to target someone who he felt wouldn't be missed. It was dark, it was late at night, and it was secluded.
But it was right near the sheriff's office.
It was. But there was pillars because it was under an overpass, and so he kind of explains later how only at these certain angles would you be able to see anything, and it was really dark. And not as many people out at 11 o'clock. Brian decided to grab his knife that he had in the car, a 12-inch large kitchen knife, and then proceeds to put on 3 pairs of gloves. He said he put on 3 pairs of gloves because plastic gloves can, quote, betray their users because they're so thin. They're actually like latex gloves, but he refers to them as plastic.
Does he give an explanation for why he has these items just in his car waiting?
Oh yeah, he goes into all of it after.
Okay.
He also put on a face mask of Michael Myers and the overalls from the horror movie Halloween that he had in his car with him.
Yeah, this is the most interesting thing to me, is that he describes just happening upon this person, but it's like he has a kill kit waiting.
Oh, he was ready for this. He said he often would drive around looking for homeless people and sex workers in hopes of finding one. And so he was basically just waiting for the perfect opportunity, and that's what he found that night.
Interesting that he had enough impulse control to have this kill kit with him all the time and knew enough to wait for a, quote, good opportunity.
Right.
One that he thought wouldn't get him caught.
Yes. And the Michael Myers outfit that he had with him was one that he had wore on Halloween one year. And I didn't actually have this in here, but he did talk later about how when he put on the overalls, it felt like a uniform for killing. It put him in that mind space.
So disturbing because he, on one hand, is showing that he has all of these awful desires and tendencies, but on the other hand, he's showing that he has the mental capacity to know that you shouldn't do those things.
Right, you can't do it on the middle of the street. He even says that. It's not like I'm going to walk down the street in the open and stab somebody.
Yeah.
That's too risky. But he definitely knows. He definitely understands what he's doing, which maybe makes this that much more terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
Next, Brian approaches the shape. He pulled back the canvas and saw an older man fast asleep. Immediately, Brian began relentlessly stabbing this man in his neck. Brian said that the man was panicking at first, and in his quote-unquote old man voice, he hollered things like, "What are you doing?" and "Why? Why?" This interaction didn't deter Brian. He said he just kept going. But he did tell the man that he had been thinking about doing this for a long time. At this point, Brian asked the detective if he could do a demonstration. He then gets on the ground and reenacts what he did, including making his growling noises. Brian said that he was straddling the man, and the man couldn't fight back.
Part of me wanted to be like, no, you can't do a demonstration, because it's almost like he's getting off again, reliving it.
Totally. But they actually are so crafty with how they do this interview. Because even talking to him about, oh, where are you working somewhere? Just getting all this information to establish that he was a functioning adult.
Mm-hmm.
All of these different things. And they're just letting him dig his own grave at this point.
Right. Which I realize. But at the same time, as the detective in the room, I would have had a hard time seeing him get excited, reenacting it.
True.
I'd be like, no, you can't do that. This is a human being we are talking about.
Yes.
You can't do that.
But then at the same time, there was discussion about they had to find out, too, is he mentally responsible for what he did? Is this boy insane?
Right.
And so it's just part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can see why you'd have that inclination to not want to let him because he's enjoying it. It's very clear when you watch it. I think he feels like he's having his moment of fame.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's relishing in it. Chillingly, Brian then explains as he sits back in his chair how surprisingly easy it was to kill the man. He said he thought it would be harder, but he didn't even break a sweat, and it only took a minute or two. Brian smiles. It is like he's getting, like we said, enjoyment from reliving the experience. Afterwards, Brian said he chanted the words "dirty" and "stinky" over and over, even though he wasn't smelling anything bad. What is interesting about this is that one of his usernames on social media was, quote, "that stinky boy." Even that was disturbing to know, because the way that he says it was just like a chant. Stinky, dirty, stinky, dirty. after he killed him. And he just said, I was just letting whatever was in my mind come out.
He's building up a different persona for himself.
Yeah. Later in the interview, Brian stated that he would estimate that he stabbed the man 30 to 40 times. He mainly targeted his neck since it's the most vulnerable area, but he also stabbed him in other areas like his head and ribs. What Brian does next is unthinkable. He feeds his morbid curiosity at the expense of another human being. Brian casually tells the officers that he cut open his belly to see his guts. He makes a remark about what they looked like and then laughs about it. After making a statement about how pink they are, in a chuckle he says, quote, "Sorry, that was morbid." He also admitted to removing the man's clothing. Brian said that next, he destroyed the man's eyes by repeatedly stabbing them. He makes hand motions and sound effects for this. He also carved slices into his leg and gave him a Joker smile, meaning he cut the tissue extending from both sides of his mouth. He explained that he was in a frenzy and was excited, so he just did whatever he felt like doing to the body at the time. Next, he cut off the man's hands and placed them into large Ziploc bags. Brian then cut off the man's right arm at the elbow and then again at the shoulder. He moved on to the left arm. However, this arm didn't go as easily. The man's arm broke between the elbow and the shoulder, the bone protruding from the skin. It sounded like he was able to sever the arm at the elbow, but left it partially cut at the shoulder. Again, Brian explained in detail how he severed the arms and expressed that he was frustrated that he had broken the bone. He later said he didn't cut up the entire body because he was just curious what it would be like, and so basically cutting the arms gave him the experience he was wanting.
Don't you think he got a little bit discouraged when it didn't go the way he wanted it to go, and that's why he stopped?
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Because I'm guessing had he been able to sever the arm like he wanted to, he probably would have moved on to the legs.
You're probably right, actually.
Because his inability to do that the way he wanted interfered with this persona that he was creating of that stinky boy.
That's disturbing, but I think you're probably right. When Brian stabbed the man in the neck, it was already partially severed. So Brian finished the job and placed the head in an old pizza box that he had in his car from a few nights prior. He then took the parts of the arm and threw them away from the scene. Brian gave officers a detailed description of where they would find the body pieces, even drawing them a map. While doing this, Brian says to the officer that he hopes he's being cooperative, and they assure him that he is. And I thought, was he searching for a well done? Because he's drawing all this stuff and he's like, oh, I hope I'm being cooperative. And they're like, yeah, you are. And then he was all, oh, good, good. Like a little kid wanting praise. And a little side note, there is a body cam of officers discovering the arms. And for some reason, the female officer starts laughing when one of the other officers says, oh, I see an arm. I truly hope she was in shock, but unfortunately, this body cam that has her laughing was later played in court. But you can tell that the officers at the scene are stunned. One even says that this is like something you'd see on TV.
Well, and I don't think people realize that sometimes laughing is just a protective measure. Like you honestly do not know what else to do. And I think that's so oftentimes with our first responders, their reaction is to laugh because if they honestly felt the grotesqueness of what they had to do and actually took it seriously all the time, you wouldn't be able to do that job.
No, you wouldn't last long.
No.
It's true. Laughter definitely is a release. Melissa and I never laugh at a victim or things that are happening, but we do sometimes laugh during our episodes because it is so heavy to carry.
Mm-hmm. And now you put a first responder in there that maybe this wasn't her first time, or maybe it was, and they don't know how to process it, or that is the way they process it.
Yes.
And so until you've been in that situation or until you have worked with first responders, it's really hard for people on the outside to judge that reaction.
Absolutely. But it did become an issue, so I thought I would mention it. But like I said, she could have been in shock. Like you said, possibly this was her first time. Maybe she'd been to lots of these, but that was probably her coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she found it funny.
No, I doubt she found it funny.
No, or we'd be telling a case about her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is a release that has to happen.
Yeah.
Or else you wouldn't have any first responders stay on the job.
True. You have to kind of dissociate a little bit, I would think. And most of us can't do that job.
No.
So we don't have the right to judge necessarily how they cope themselves with that job.
Exactly.
When you get up in the morning and you get ready for work, you're not expecting you're going to be coming across this.
No.
Back in the interview, Brian continued to explain that he placed the man's hands and head in the trunk of his car and went home, where he hid them inside his room. First, he wrapped them in multiple white kitchen garbage bags and then placed them inside the tote in his closet. These body parts would be what his mother would later discover. When he explained to officers about how he hid the body parts, he stopped to give them a lesson on the 3 rule, or the rule of 3, that he said he coined regarding decomposition. He said he's not bragging, but he discovered how all the stages have a rule of 3 to them. From 3 hours for rigor mortis to set in to 3 years for a body to become a skeleton. But I'll spare you all the stages in between. When he finishes this lesson, Brian asks one of the officers if he's accurate. And when she says somewhat, he gets gleeful and reacts like he just aced a test. Actually jolts up in his chair and takes a drink of his water like, yes, knew I got it right.
Immaturity, hey?
Yeah. And just how superior he wanted to be.
Or attention seeking.
Yes.
Right? He sought the fame, and so now he's seeking their approval or their attention. Like, look, I'm a good student. I did it right.
But also, I'm up here in the same leagues as everybody else because I coined this. I came up with this on my own. Look how smart I am.
Right.
I know what I'm doing. While still at home, Brian had washed off the knife and threw away any items that had blood on them. Except for his clothing that he was wearing. He ran those through the washing machine twice.
Because he wanted to kill again, and they made him feel like a killer?
Basically. Brian admitted that he was going to eventually throw away the body parts, but that he was likely going to keep a finger because it is small, it doesn't take up much space, and wouldn't stink that much.
As a trophy.
Yes. And honestly, if his mom hadn't called him in, I think he would have collected a lot of fingers. Speaking of hiding things in his room, Brian told police that the year prior, his parents found his kill kit that he had been assembling. This kit included hammers, shovels, knives, large zip ties, duct tape, and a saw. He said he made the kit to use to hurt people in the future. When his parents questioned him, he convinced them that it was for other things. They told him to throw it away or they would call the police. Brian admitted that he made this kill kit to use with a sex worker. He wanted to get a sex worker to come with him to get her alone. He wanted to subdue her, tie her up, and then torture her. He gave up on this because he couldn't really find sex workers out on the street, and because he felt it would be too risky. He threw away the kill kit so his parents wouldn't call the police on him.
Interesting that they were that disturbed by it, that they were willing to threaten him to call the police.
Right.
And yet...
And it wasn't an idle threat. I think they obviously would have, because they do end up calling the police on their son.
Is that at the same time that they got him more psychiatric help?
I'm not sure. I think he was continuing to have this psychiatric help throughout his teens, up until this point. He was still being monitored.
It's an interesting thing. They knew he was getting this serious.
Well, I think they saw it. And of course, as a parent, you'd be like, why the heck do you have all of this stuff collected?
Right.
That's going to send red flags. He's giving them a different excuse for it. And they said, we don't care, get rid of it, or we're calling the police.
Mm-hmm.
So probably in the back of their mind, because you don't want to think that your son is going to be a murderer. You're thinking, just get rid of it, we'll move past. Because it makes us uncomfortable. We don't want you to use that for anything sinister.
As most parents would. But they do know about his obsession about serial killers. So now he's actually collecting physical things, like a kill kit. That's disturbing.
Yes.
Which is probably why they threaten to, we're going to take this to the police if you don't get rid of this.
Exactly.
So to me, it says that they did have some suspicions about his behavior.
Oh, definitely. They knew that it wasn't necessarily healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they were trying to channel that in a more positive way. Well, maybe you need to work in that field.
Right.
He probably could have been really good as a crime scene investigator or working in forensics.
Yeah, just using it towards a different means.
Right. At this point in the investigation, police found the body parts at the crime scene and at the Cohee's home, but they still had no idea where the rest of the victim was. And this takes us back to the night at the boat ramp. After going back home and cleaning up, Brian tried to sleep, but he couldn't. He said that there was a hole in one of the gloves, so he was worried that he had left a fingerprint. Brian decided to go back to the crime scene. He picked up the larger portion of the man's body and placed it inside the trunk of his car. He said this was a difficult task. Brian drove to the Blue Heron boat ramp. He reversed up to the water and took out the body and placed it in the water. He used his foot to wiggle the body into the current and watched it float away. What Brian didn't expect was getting his car stuck and eventually sliding into the river. He expressed how he was nervous about his own safety. Because he got wet in the frigid February waters, he laughed about how he didn't want to be known for dying of hypothermia during a botched attempt of hiding a body. This is when Brian decided to call his parents for help and came up with the story of going to the Blue Heron to think. Soon afterwards, bystanders happened to pull up and even stop to offer Brian help. Brian was so pleased with himself when discussing the blood that the officers found on his car, but how he had already gotten rid of the body. He was like, "Ha, you opened up the trunk and nothing was there."
But you left evidence behind.
He didn't realize the blood was there. He thought he was so clever. He also messaged a group chat on Discord that night about totaling his car and almost dying. He wanted attention and sympathy. Before the interview ends, an officer asks if Brian took any photographs that night. Brian says yes, but said he deleted them so they couldn't be used as evidence. Ultimately, these deleted pictures were able to be retrieved and used as evidence against him. When asked about why he killed this man, Brian said it wasn't a sexual thing, because they right out asked him that. But that's debatable. He said he studied serial killers and thought if they could do it, why couldn't he? He also simply just wanted to know what it was like to kill and dismember someone. He said that killers like Ted Bundy had said that murder is the best feeling in the world, so he wanted to experience it. According to Brian, the feeling wasn't as good as he thought it would be. Brian said, quote, "It was intense. It was a rush of adrenaline. My whole body was shaking. Not like out of fear. It was like, it wasn't fear. It was just pure, what's the word? Excitement, I suppose. Not excitement as in joy, but excitement as in increased heartbeat, sweating, that type of thing." When asked if he enjoyed it, Brian reflected and then answered, quote, "I don't know, just sort of neutral about the whole thing. I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't hate it." He also said that if he could go back, he likely wouldn't have done it, knowing now what it felt like and how everything turned out, meaning getting arrested. But even when he talks about increased heartbeat and sweating, he makes sure after he says that to be like, "But I didn't break a sweat when I killed him. That part was easy."
Interesting. So do you think he would have went on to kill then?
I do. I totally do.
Even though he didn't get a thrill that he anticipated?
Yeah, I think that he would have.
Maybe he would have still sought after that thrill. Okay, this time didn't work, so how do I get that thrill that everybody talks about?
Right. Like you said, well, it didn't go as I planned. I broke the arm, so I need to get it right. Or maybe I do need to move on to a sex worker where it's more risky. And then he could have that sexual element involved. I 100% believe he would have.
I can see that. I just think he probably would have approached it from a more analytical way.
Possibly. And part of the reason I think this is because regardless of his letdown, when being booked after the interview, Brian admitted that he felt like Hannibal Lecter.
He didn't get the thrill from the actual murder. He got the thrill from being able to tell everybody about it.
Right.
And act it out.
Yes, I think he got more so the thrill of being a murderer than murdering. And this was his first time, and look how brutal. Look what he did to this body. So I think it would have just escalated, in my opinion. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about that and find out. Before we go any further, I do need to tell you about the man whom Brian so callously and viciously murdered, because he was somebody, a person whom a lot of people loved and now miss. Warren Bruce Barnes was born on May 19th, 1951 in Grand Junction, Mesa County, Colorado. He was 69 years old at the time of his death in 2021. Warren's parents were Elva and John Barnes. He had 7 brothers and 1 sister.
That's a big family.
It is a lot of boys. That girl must have been really protected. 8 brothers.
Quite the princess, hey?
Yes. 3 of his brothers and his sister were still alive when Warren was murdered. In one of the write-ups about Warren, it stated, quote, "Warren was a lifelong resident of the Grand Valley who was well known and respected by the community. He loved the outdoors and nature and spent many hours watching and feeding birds and was also an avid reader. Warren lived his entire life in Colorado." At the time of his passing, Warren was homeless and living in Grand Junction. despite being down on his luck, Warren was described as being kind, gentle, hardworking, and quiet. Warren was friendly and had many friends in the neighborhood. He would often hang out by a bridal boutique called Monique's Bridal. She would set out a chair near the store, and Warren would spend most days sitting in the chair reading books. He was well known as an avid reader, and the townfolk called him, quote, the reading man. If you knew Warren, you liked him. Many of the shop owners would give him books to read. They would sometimes give him cash and things like pastries, peaches, and drinks. Brian picked Warren as his victim because he thought he wouldn't be missed, but nothing could be further from the truth. The woman who owned Monique's Bridal was the first one to call the police. This woman, Monique, had seen Warren Saturday evening at around 5 o'clock. She said to Warren that she would see him in the morning, and he said okay, and this meant that he would be there. But sadly, he wouldn't be there the next day. He would be murdered before midnight. Warren worked for a company called People Ready. People Ready called Monique when Warren didn't show up for work. Warren worked for the company for 4 years and had always showed up when he was supposed to, so it was concerning when he was a no-show.
It's just so sweet that he has like this whole network of people that he's connected to.
Yes.
Like his work knew to call Monique's because they knew he hung out there and read his books there.
The whole community, everybody knew him and loved him. He was just like this pillar. He was so kind and caring. My heart really went out for Warren. He just seemed like such an amazing man. People Ready said someone had contacted them because they found Warren's wallet at the Blue Heron boat ramp. There was information in the wallet to connect the wallet to People Ready, so that is why they called People Ready. And any guesses who found the wallet?
Brian?
It was Brian Sr., Brian's dad.
Oh, when they were standing around with the car?
Well, actually, the day in between the two events, Brian Sr. discovered Warren's wallet and the knife inside his son's water-drenched car. Brian Sr. was trying to do the right thing and locate Warren to give him back his wallet. I believe that Brian had told his father that he just found the wallet at the boat ramp and threw it in his car. Remember that Brian Sr. ran the life jacket program, a detail that police would remember from the night before. Monique, the bridal shop owner, told police that she had given Warren $20 the night before, and when they found his wallet, there was still a few dollars in it. By looking at the crime scene photos, I counted 6. When Monique spoke with police, she told them that there was no way that Warren would have walked all the way down to the boat ramp, so it was strange that his wallet was found there. Police had been in this exact same spot the night before helping a kid get his car out of the water, and were now investigating a missing person in the same spot.
But they already started to connect the dots when Brian's mom called.
I don't know how quickly which officers were informed, but this all happened within a 2-day span.
Right.
He was murdered late on the 27th, and then by the afternoon of the 1st, Terry had called the police.
Right. But I can see that even if she hadn't, it sounds like police would have at least went to question him about it.
Absolutely. They were making this connection like, hey, that kid last night that was here, his dad runs the life jacket program.
Mm-hmm.
But then that also would kind of explain, well, he was just here the night before. It would make sense that he found the wallet.
Oh, maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
It would check out too. But I do think the police work was good in this case. Another shop owner who was concerned also spoke with police. She said that Warren always showed up at 6 a.m. or earlier every single day. Their shop let him in before all the other customers to give him his free morning coffee. About Warren, she said, quote, "He's the nicest old man ever." Monique was able to give police a photo of her friend that she had taken the year prior to help aid in the search. She told police that she hoped that they would find Warren, but also said that she had a really bad feeling. She was clearly distraught over not knowing where he was.
Sad.
It is. Warren's death is so heartbreaking to me. He was loved and he mattered, and it puts a fire in my belly that a kid like Brian would think otherwise. You despicable little dirtbag. And I felt so sad over Warren. Like, I felt like learning about Warren, I felt like I loved Warren, and I've never met him. Brian was charged with first-degree murder, tampering with a deceased human body, and tampering with evidence. Brian pled not guilty by reason of insanity to all the charges. Brian claimed that his mental health diagnoses and the environmental stressors that he had at the time caused him to become temporarily insane. Some of these stressors he claimed included the global pandemic, losing a family dog, fighting with family, and not taking his medications. Brian's trial began on January 17th, 2023. Thankfully, the officers who interviewed him had done a masterful job at it. They asked all the right questions. Brian had clearly stated that he was not intoxicated at any time. He said that when police came to his aid at the boat ramp, he didn't even have to take a breathalyzer test because he was sober. This made it impossible for him to claim that he was under the influence at the time of the murder, because when he met with officers at the ramp, it was only mere hours after he killed Warren. Brian spoke about how he held down a job. This proved he was functioning in society just fine. He also went into great detail about how he put on 3 pairs of gloves and made a kill kit, as well as having a knife and a disguise in his car, all of which points to premeditation, not a momentary lapse of judgment. He had even been driving around for months looking for this opportunity.
Which he told them.
Yep. Brian also bragged about what he did to Warren afterwards and the lengths he went to in order to not get caught. Things like going back to remove the body in case he left any fibers or prints on it, hiding body parts, washing his clothes and the knife, and deleting the pictures he had taken at the scene. Again, not something he would do if he was unaware of his actions. When Brian had gone to his friend's house the next day, he made up a story that he told his friend and her husband about how he had found a dead body the night before and admitted to messing with it. He said he got blood on his car, and after police pulled his car out of the river, they might try to frame him for murder. So he was clearly trying to get ahead of the situation if things went south for him. He wanted his friends to be able to vouch for his story. Say like, oh no, yeah, he told us he found a body.
But he didn't turn it in when he saw the cops. Like, there's huge holes in that story.
Well, because he messed with the body, he said, and that's how he got the blood.
Right.
So he didn't want to get in trouble for that. But then this was right before he was arrested, before they came. And then he just spilled the beans anyway. Thankfully, he did. During the trial, the prosecution provided the courts with Brian's internet search history, and it is as bad as you think. Some of these searches included how deadly is a neck stab wound, how do people react when held at knife point, and are homeless people safe to be with. He also searched things about other crimes like home invasions, as well as things like how to wipe data from an Android phone and how long does it take a body to sink. These last 2 searches were made after he had already killed Warren. Brian had clearly been considering foul play for the past 6 to 12 months before the murder. Because Brian was claiming insanity, he was evaluated by a number of mental health professionals. Dr. Laura Serrano Amerigo, a forensic psychologist who met with Brian, explained to the jury that a person can have severe mental health issues and still be legally sane. She believed that this was the case with Brian. He was not experiencing any type of psychosis while he murdered Warren. Legally, Brian was sane and should be held accountable for his heinous actions. To counteract this claim, the defense called Dr. Paul Sprague to the stand, who stated that what looked like planning was actually interference, which means that thoughts were essentially disrupting Brian's mental clarity and potential. He argued that Brian was just indulging in his interest to the maximum, not plotting an actual murder, making him legally insane at the time of the murder. Despite Brian telling police that he had been waiting to kill somebody for months leading up to actually doing it.
Those were just intrusive thoughts, Christy.
Yeah, it was not interference, sorry. In my opinion.
In our opinion, he's a dirtbag.
Oh, I think in everyone's opinion, he's a dirtbag, however you slice this. Evidence was presented in court. The knife, white latex gloves, and crime scene photos, just to name a few. And to be honest, I'm unsure if Warren's complete body was ever retrieved from the river. I couldn't find any articles stating that his body was found, but I also didn't read that it wasn't. That being said, I did read that there was an autopsy conducted. The board-certified forensic pathologist who examined Warren's remains stated that he had completed around 8,000 autopsies during his career, and he only encountered cases as extreme as this one in about 1% of cases.
Did the autopsy give details on anything on the torso? Because that's the piece that's missing.
Right, and the legs. The part that I found was all on the head.
You can have an autopsy just done on pieces. The fact that there was an autopsy done doesn't tell you that they found the rest of it.
Exactly. That's why I'm really not sure if they found the rest. I didn't find news articles saying like the body was found later in the river. So I really don't know. I'm sorry, listeners. I'm assuming actually that they didn't, because I think there would have been news reports about pulling the body out of the water.
I didn't get that far into my research, so I can't help you. Sorry.
Well, they didn't see it when they pulled the car out of the river. Even Brian talks about how he looked down the river and couldn't see the body. Family and friends of Warren attended the trial and spoke about how much Warren positively impacted the community. They expressed their care and love for Warren. The trial lasted for 12 days, and the jury deliberated for almost 2 full days before reaching a verdict.
Always surprises me.
Right?
Seems so obvious to us that he's not insane.
Yeah, to us it seems cut and dry. But thankfully, Brian Cohee was found guilty on February 3rd, 2023 of all 3 charges. 3 days later, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder. He received an additional 13 and a half years for his 2 tampering charges. Today, Brian is 23 years old and is currently incarcerated at the Buena Vista Correctional Facility in Colorado Springs. The judge in this case was Judge Richard Gurley. He said that this case was one of the most horrific he has encountered in his 37-year tenure with the criminal justice system. People are still mourning the tragic death of Warren Barnes. In November of 2021, a metal memorial statue was made by a man named Tim Navin and installed near the bridal shop downtown where he liked to read. This statue is a replica of the chair that he used to sit in. Sitting on the seat of the chair are 4 metal books, the top one opened with pages looking like they are blowing in the wind. The chair is placed by a metal tree, and it is quite a beautiful tribute to Warren. Brian's family are devastated about their son's actions. Brian's mother, Terry, has publicly expressed her sympathies towards the community and Warren's loved ones. In my opinion, this woman stopped her son from becoming a serial killer by turning him in. Brian's father stated something that I found quite profound during an early interview. Brian Sr. stated that his son was obviously sick, but that they didn't know the depth of the water. That is the case of a sick and twisted man who had no regard for human life. The dirtbag who just wanted to see what it was like to take a life and was proud of it. The greatly disturbed Brian Cohee Jr.
That is a disturbing case, Christy.
So disturbing.
And I'm glad you covered it, and I didn't.
I had a hard time covering this one, to be honest.
Well, it's one of the reasons why it's still in my research pile, is because it's so disturbing, and the detail that he goes into. His interview made me so angry.
Yes. It is actually disgusting to watch. Mm-hmm. It's sickening.
It is so sickening. But that's how dirtbags are.
Yes.
And we'll be back again next week with another dirtbag to discuss.
So we hope you'll join us.
Until then.
See ya.
Bye.
My computer's dying. She's a good old girl. We just need to get a little bit longer out of her. This one's a little ornery, but we love her.
We love her.
Yeah. Good vibes to you. We're grateful. Work for us today. I know as much about cars as I do about guns, you guys.
Cars and guns are not our thing.
No.
I think it's an M300 as a car.
But is there an M3 something for a gun? 60? Maybe. It sounds familiar to me. We're recording on a Saturday, you guys. This is a huge anomaly for us. And so we don't know what this is going to bring. We have Saturday vibes.
No, there is no M360.
But why did we both think it?
Oh, wait. There's an M60.
Okay. All right.
An M60. No 360. Okay. An M60.
An M60. I don't know what that looks like, but
it's
I
one of the big
you.
guns.
Okay. An M60. That's how we talk about guns. Is it big or little?
Sorry. You're going to have to cut all this out, but let's see. It's a full-size 4-door, 5-passenger front engine. Front all-wheel drive.
Thanks for that. Now turn off your computer so you don't keep reading.
I like research, Christy.
But not while I'm telling you a case, my dear.
Should I wait for the train?
Tired of waiting for trains. Planes, trains, and automobiles. When Terry tried to get him in, but
Christy, you're almost done. Your head that much.
I know, I just moved my eyeball.
That's okay, I can shave my butt.
Shift your butt.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.